I'm going to show you 5 ways to communicate assertively during important one-on-one conversations, and especially in group meetings, whether it's on Zoom or in person. Group situations can be very intimidating for individuals who lean toward being introverted. So these 5 tips will help you not just assert yourself, but also do so in ways that are extremely helpful for the rest of the group. I've organized these 5 tips from what I believe are the easiest, lowest risk ways to put yourself out there, and they gradually move toward more and more challenging but valuable ways to jump in. If you're keeping track, this video is number 3 in a 5-part series on assertive communication skills. You can check out all 5 videos by looking at the links in the expandable description below this video. By far the easiest way to demonstrate assertive communication during important one-on-one or group meetings is by asking questions. Questions are great because if you know what's on the agenda, you can prepare questions in advance. This works especially well for introverts who might not excel at thinking of questions on the fly and jumping in really quickly during the middle of an unexpected topic. Just look at the agenda ahead of time, prepare, write your questions on a notepad, and you're ready to go. Questions demonstrate instant assertive engagement. For example, leaders tend to ask more questions than employees. So when you ask a question, you will come across as more of a leader for that part of the conversation. Another good reason to ask a question is that if something seems off to you or doesn't make sense, then it probably doesn't make sense to others in the room. And that's why asking questions is generally seen as a very helpful communication activity. And of course, you can always ask questions if the other person is trying to steamroll the meeting. There is a technique in the world of sales called assume the sale, where the salesperson talks as if it's already a given that you're going to make this purchase. And this can make customers feel more pressured to make the purchase and buy something. But even in non-sales situations, many communicators will speak as if everybody already agrees with them. So if you don't agree, this is where you can use questions to communicate assertively. Anytime you feel as if people are making assumptions as a way to steamroll other perspectives, ask a few clarifying questions about what they're saying. Play the devil's advocate, ask some what-if questions, or introduce another perspective in the conversation through your questions. Questions are great because they're very low risk in terms of putting yourself out there because, hey, you're just asking, and most people in the group will be glad you did. The second low-risk way to communicate assertively is to bring information to share with the group. You can share data, summarize the findings of a study, bring statistics, show graphs, or distribute any kind of internal or external feedback as a way to assertively participate. It's usually best to bring some kind of printed version of the information, or at least something you can put up and display on a screen so other people can see exactly what you're talking about. So look at the agenda beforehand, prepare, and bring some relevant information with you. And when the time is right, share it with a concise opening statement like, I came across some information we may want to consider. That information can then work as a jumping off place for the group's discussion. You can share it as a way to support your point or a point of view that somebody else has raised. And the great thing about bringing information to a group meeting is that it becomes a stimulus that everybody can discuss and respond to. The third way to communicate assertively, especially in groups, is to join forces with someone else's comment. This is another low-risk way to jump in and get your voice into the conversation. If you're a little tentative, for example, and don't have enough confidence yet to be the first one to express a new point of view, you can wait till someone else does it and then piggyback on their comment. Keep it real simple. You might say, I agree with John on this because, and then finish the rest of that sentence with a little bit of detail. One reason joining forces is relatively low risk is that, yes, you're putting yourself out there, but you already know before you speak that you're not alone in your opinion. There's safety in numbers, as they say. And if you're the second or even third person to say something, then who can blame you specifically? I personally think joining forces with someone else's comment is the most underused approach to assertive communication. The fourth way to assert yourself is to offer your point of view. This is slightly higher risk than the other tips so far because you're putting yourself out there, your position. On the plus side, you get extra credit for being assertive because only a small percentage of people in any group meeting will do this. For almost 10 years straight, I observed problem-solving groups for a big-name consulting firm as part of their yearly training and coaching. I was the outside coach they brought in to help some of their new consultants communicate more assertively in group situations like we're talking about. I took detailed notes for years, and the pattern became clear pretty early on that only 20% or so of group members expressed their point of view during each meeting. The other 80% of the group members were doing things like asking questions and joining forces, which we already talked about, but the most assertive group members voiced their opinions, their preferences, and articulated their arguments in a clear way. So if you're ready to stretch your assertiveness, start sharing your point of view at least once per meeting. The fifth way you can communicate assertively is to suggest a process the group could follow during the discussion. I would say this one is the most challenging way to stretch yourself because it's a leadership behavior. For example, one of the most common ways you'll hear a group leader suggest a process to follow is that they say something like, "We're here to talk about issue A. I'd like to hear everybody's opinion on issue A." The simple process, of course, the leader is suggesting is that they want to hear everybody's opinion. Suggesting a conversational process like this is assertive, though, because if you do this, the group will literally be following your lead. Here are some other ways to suggest a process depending upon the needs of the situation. If you feel the conversation drifting, you could suggest that the group list the pros and cons of the issue. You could ask the group to talk about the long-term or short-term considerations for an important decision. You can ask a question about who else the group should involve in whatever decision you're making. You could suggest a process for brainstorming possible solutions to a problem. Of the 5 tips, this one is the most assertive because if you're not the leader in the room, or at least one of the senior team members, you have to be sure that you're not stepping on the official leader's toes. If that official leader, for example, is already routinely suggesting processes like this to follow, then I wouldn't follow this tip. At the same time, if you get the sense that the leader is leaving space for this kind of emerging leadership and wants to see assertive contributions from group members, then try this out and suggest a process that the group might follow for that part of the meeting. And don't be pushy about this, of course. If they don't take your suggestion or you get a weird vibe from the official leader, that's completely fine. Just treat it like you've asked a question and let things move on. You've done your part. You've demonstrated assertiveness and made a potentially helpful suggestion, and you get credit simply for trying to be helpful. Here's a summary of all 5 communication tips. These are all potential tools in your toolbox that go from the lowest risk ways to put yourself out there to the highest risk tips. What I suggest is that you start immediately putting those first few tips into practice, but stretch yourself and put yourself out there a little bit more over time. As mentioned, this is part 3 in a series on assertive communication skills. In part 4, we're going to talk about a little more advanced skill, which is how to disagree assertively and respectfully. God bless, and I'll see you next time.